Well, hey, it's me, your friend Valerie. I'm just finished up a podcast with Matt Gray called 50 Tastes of Gray, and we kind of talked about everything. We talked about food, food memories. We talked about what makes people disagree and why we have such a hard time coming together on issues where we have a lot of difference. We talked about AI and how afraid of it we are, and how much it angers us. We covered a lot, and we got really personal, and that's why you should watch it and you should watch other episodes, because you get an opportunity to really get to know a person on a very human level. And I think that's a lot of what's missing today. And so definitely check out this episode and check out other ones on the channel. I thought it would be fun, actually. I was not surprised. Exactly, right? It's real. Best podcast I've been on so far. Also, yeah, don't tell the others I said that, though. Oh, so funny.
I'm Matthew Gray, and this is 50 Tastes of Gray. That was Valerie Polunas giving you just a taste. Let me show you where our ride begins. Do you like uncovering and revealing those parts of you away from the business world, more of the personal stuff?
I do, and I think that's something that a lot of podcasts don't do enough of. I imagine that was probably the part of your job as a chef.
When it comes to showcasing and revealing, I think it's so much nicer to show the person's personality, whether they're in business or whether they're an author or whatever it is that they might be doing, because the audience wants to see that real person.
That's what I wish networking was like.
Right.
Because when I go to networking events, most of the time it's give your 30-second elevator pitch, and it doesn't go much beyond that with most people. And for me, that's a real bummer, because I find it's just an opportunity to get to connect with somebody. And if they like what I do and they want to use what I do, that's kind of secondary. So I'm probably terrible at networking. Anybody in business is probably like, that's not what you do it for, but I don't know.
You know, when people go to those kind of networking events, you'll never get someone's business if they don't dig you. It has nothing to do with what you're saying, what your elevator pitch is all about. It's always about whether, do I like Valerie?
Yeah. And I would say, especially in the line of work that I'm in, because I do coaching and I facilitate, and people have to trust me, which means they have to like something about me, right? And have some kind of affinity with me to want to do that. So yeah, it's so important.
When it comes down to pitching yourself, how do you do it softly? How do you persuade someone to like you? Because, you're in business to, I assume, not only feel good, but to make a couple of bucks.
Yeah, you want to make a living. I mean, fortunately, I'm doing something I actually love doing, so that helps. I think compared to when I was selling stuff for other people, that wasn't nearly as fun, right? So I think that makes a difference. Just when it's your baby, your thing that you're passionate about, that reads through. But I would say too, most of the time, what's more effective for me is asking them questions and understanding what's really going on for them, because I'll find out a lot about whether or not they need what I do, if I'm the right fit or somebody else I know is, or you just find out hey, we have these cool things in common. And, I want to actually see the person again and not worry so much about the business side of things.
How did you become a specialist in conflict resolution?
Lots of study and a lot of experiences just being with people from other cultures. And that includes within the United States, right? Just living in different parts of the country and understanding that people see the world differently and approach it differently. And a lot of practice, a lot of skills practice. I will never be, I think, an expert at it, because it's one of those perishable skills that we all have. We just maybe don't give it as much love as we should. And that's why we find ourselves in these kinds of destructive situations.
Yeah. Can you explain the difference between conflict resolution, arbitration, negotiation, and all of the other related fields?
So arbitration is typically with a judge, right? And there's a decision being made and folks can present their case, but they don't have a decision to make. Conflict resolution could include arbitration. It can include mediation, which is really more driven by the people involved to make some kind of decision and solve the problem together. Negotiation, I think, happens just naturally when people are going through a dispute, right? Because you have certain boundaries, you have certain needs you want fulfilled. And so you're going to be playing a little bit of a game with the other person or people to try to get what you need. And where the resolution comes in is being willing to sometimes make a compromise. But at the best situations, it's being able to come up with some kind of creative solution where you meet your needs and you meet theirs too. And that's always the goal for me in my position, is trying to get them in a place where that creativity can happen. So they both walk away happy.
You just mentioned a creative way to be able to get to the bottom of things. If you're going in with that thought in mind to find a creative way, but you're dealing with kind of standard, conventional people in business who aren't creative, they don't have their creative legs, how do you work that through? How do you make that happen?
And this anybody will tell you if they've done a team building thing in a corporate environment, how they can be really awkward and lame and everything. I think you have to know the group, and that's part of the job, is getting to know them up front, getting to understand, what might be a little too challenging for them and put them in a position where they're like, this is uncomfortable. But I do try to make things interactive and have a gaming element to it. It doesn't necessarily have to be something that I would use with 12-year-olds that I would also use with adults, right? I would make it age appropriate. I do think a lot of adults, when it comes to a topic like this, that's really tough to wrap your head around and it makes people uncomfortable, that actually making it fun and funny can really help. And the biggest thing is just, if they seem like they hate that kind of stuff, to kind of ease them into it. Maybe start out really serious and then get into some of the more fun elements so that they feel a little bit more comfortable. Because, like we were just talking about, they have to get to know me and trust me. So if I start out with a thing they hate up front, I'm going to spend the rest of the time working on, trying to fix that and make friends. So it's just a matter of reading them and understanding how to bring them in.
Have you noticed that over the years that when a third party becomes involved, that people tend to feel like, okay, well, this is going to end up being a lose-lose, or you win, I lose, or I win, you lose, or it's just because of that whole third party energy?
Yeah, it's interesting. I think there's a benefit to a third party coming in, right? Because it's someone who doesn't know the business, right? They don't know the issue down into the weeds. They're not tied to it. So they can have a little bit of neutrality, right? And I mean, in my position, I don't have to care about the outcome. In all honesty, I don't have to live with that outcome. I mean, I do care. I don't want to make it worse than I started with, but I'm in a position where what matters to them doesn't necessarily have that same depth, that same concern. So I think there's an advantage. But yeah, I think I've had clients, especially when I've worked with couples in the past, where they come in and they're immediately like, you're on my side, right? You understand that this one's the reason why we're in this. And so that there's always a period of kind of educating them that I'm not here to take sides, that, this is for you two to work out. I'm just giving you the space to do it, to help you.
That totally makes sense. However, doesn't it depend on who's bringing you into play, or do both parties have to agree on whether or not they want you to come in and start from there?
Yeah, they definitely both need to want me there. I've been in situations where it was clear somebody kind of got dragged into it, and those don't typically have the best results despite my best efforts, right? So it's better when they feel like it's a little bit voluntary, which can be tough if you're talking about a business environment, because a lot of times people are, they make that mandatory that they're coming to a training or something. But as much as possible, I try to make it a situation where they feel like they have a choice to be there. And if it feels like it's going to be a disaster from the beginning, that's something I call out, like, hey, is this going to be a problem? Because I had an experience very, very young when I was still in grad school, co-mediating something where we shouldn't have done it. We really shouldn't have done it. And I knew 5 minutes in, this is not going to go well. And, an hour later, it was a disaster. And I remember in the debrief with my professor at the time, it was like, yeah, that was a bad idea, because that was definitely one-sided.
How do you navigate the territory when you and your two clients are in the room and one of the clients is more gifted verbally? Is that going to make space in your head, say, this person seems to have their shit together. I kind of like where he or she is coming from. How does that affect you?
I think that's the one thing that I always have to be mindful of, right? Is having that awareness of, am I biased towards a person for that? I think the biggest thing that I try to do, and this is the complicated part about coaching or working with more than one person at the time, if I'm coaching just you, I get to know you and your style and how you want me to speak to you and the vocabulary you use. When I've got two people and they are that different, it's a little bit more complicated. But typically what I do up front is talk with folks involved of like, what kind of language is going to get in the way, right? Are you going to be okay if it goes in this direction and these kinds of words are used? Because I'll give an example. I worked with a couple where the wife was familiar with the training I've had because she worked for the organization. So she already knew all the vocabulary. She knew the lingo. And the husband admitted, I don't like therapy speak. I don't like that kind of stuff. And so we sat down in the beginning and I got them to agree on what was acceptable in terms of, could any therapy speak come up and when, and what do we do if it does? And that helped a lot. And actually in that situation, the wife was fine with us not touching that stuff and adapting to where he was. And she actually saw like, okay, it's fair if he sees this being something that makes sense to him and isn't going to make things weird. And I wouldn't want to do that anyway, because if that's already going to immediately make it seem like I'm siding with her instead of him.
Language definitely has a lot to play in communication, because if you're going in as a young person who you are and you're dealing with people who are primarily, I'm guessing, older than you, and you're clearing the field and you're doing discovery calls and you're like blah, blah, blah with all that stuff, a lot of people are really resistant to the woo-woo and that kind of phrasing. So tell me, how do you deal with that?
Yeah, I've heard woo-woo. I've heard touchy-feely stuff. I think it just comes down to trying to use words that resonate, right? To not use the touchy-feely stuff. And I know plenty of coaches who do. And I wouldn't even want to be coached by folks who use the super woo-woo, to be honest with you. I'm very much a realist and I want it to sound like a real person talking to me. That's definitely a barrier. It's not necessarily a barrier with the people that would be like my point of entry into an organization, like say HR, because that's kind of the vibe in that department. You might get folks who have been working a long time or in upper level positions where they have to be assured that that's not what this is going to be. Try to do whatever I can and not make it too weird and keep it in their lingo.
Tell me the primary conflicts that businesses might have before you get called in. Now, we know money is at the top, but what are 2 or 3 other ones?
Anytime there's a change. So if they have a change in leadership at the top, if you're on a team and you've got some turnover happening and you have people who have been around a really long time and they know how it's supposed to be done. And then you have those newbies that are really excited. They want to try all the stuff they've done somewhere else. That can really come to play. It could just be where they're dealing with the latest thing that's going on. Like everyone's dealing with AI and what that means for people's jobs and what it means for the organization, how they're going to adopt it. And I've talked with friends where one of my friends, she's in IT, and she mentioned, on the one end, we had the people diving in head first who accidentally gave away company IP because they're just like, let me just dump everything in ChatGPT, to the people who are like, I'm not letting this thing replace me. And so that kind of thing can happen. Or even when folks went from being remote to going back to the office, that caused a lot of it. Sometimes it's like a trendy thing, right? A thing that's really causing issues for any place, regardless. There's just some of those standard themes of change in those environments that really makes sense to bring me in. And hopefully it's not a bad personality.
Right.
Sometimes you get that, and then that's more one-on-one work than working with an entire team. The team issues are usually just because there's some kind of change happening and some of them are ready and some of them are not.
Now, how are your skills related to real life situations with friends or family and that kind of thing? Are you skilled in those areas or are you pretty much business only?
I mean, I'll be honest, it's harder to do in your own system. I have definitely had times where I did not do what I tell people to do. I tell stories all the time about where I too have failed, right? Nobody's perfect. I guess the advantage I have is I can recognize when I've done that and I go back and I do use the stuff to try to repair and fix. But yeah, I try to use it in my personal life as much as I can, but it's definitely harder when it's family than anything else. Because there's just something about family. There's that history. There's just all that stuff that you have to still love them, right? There's all that stuff tied up in that's a little different than work.
So does that bleed over into the work scenario in that you're personable and lovely and all that, but then there's all this kind of mixed up energy between the business and the personal and how do I approach? And
I think where the bleed happens is if I'm working with these kinds of groups and I'm exhausted from the work because it takes a lot to listen to like angry people and people in disputes all day long, that sometimes it comes home, right? And, it might be something really small. They just need something from me and I need time to decompress. And that's when I think that it happens the most, right? Because it's like, I had a rough day and I kind of took in all that stuff from people and I got to get it out. And I don't want to get it out on you, but the timing is not good right now.
So what's the level of chaos in your brain today, right now?
Level of chaos? Oh gosh. Today's not a bad day. I would say though. I would say when I have a day where I'm coaching or trading, I'm out networking, I'm doing like a full day of stuff, it gets a little bit crowded for sure. I think that's the nature of being a small business owner, of being an entrepreneur. There's just always something. And I'm by myself, so I'm wearing every hat there is right now. So there are days that are better than others for sure. But I would say on the regular, it's pretty chaotic.
So you're a one-girl band.
Yes. Hope to not be someday, but right now, yes.
Barring this show today, right now, what's the last time you had a nice laugh?
I was probably watching SNL with my husband, and I forget which sketch it was, but it's usually when something awful and unexpected happens that I burst out laughing. It's the kind of thing I shouldn't laugh at, but I can't help myself.
The inappropriate laughter, that's really good. When you were growing up, what was the first room where you learned how people disagree?
I'm trying to think of a specific time. I think a big one, there were probably smaller things. In my own family, there were little things like people usually just avoided, and I'd see their resentment kind of bubble up and explode sometimes. On a bigger scale, growing up, I was in a church where the clergy decided to kind of dabble in politics and religion, and my grandmother was not having it. And she and some of the older parishioners went and had a real talking to with them. So it was kind of the first time that I saw a situation, especially where there was a power imbalance in a way, where people could have a very different idea of what's appropriate and how they handled that and whether they worked through it or not. In our case, we didn't really work through it with them and we left that church and went to a totally different one. But that was kind of the first time I really saw that stuff in action.
You had to speak up when you were little, Valerie.
I would say my grandmother, probably first and foremost, because she was not afraid to speak her mind, and she didn't care if somebody was in a position of authority. She'd say something, because I was a really shy kid. I was one of those kids. My mom was a teacher, so I did not speak up in class or anything unless, I was called on and stuff. And if somebody wanted to talk to me, I ignored them because I didn't need it getting back to mom. But yeah, I think my grandmother kind of helped me get out of that a little bit.
So she's someone you definitely look up to, I can tell, because you just referenced her a couple of different times. So she's been a big influence on you.
Yeah, well, I mean, we grew up 2 houses down from them. My entire childhood, until I graduated and went off to college, I lived 2 houses from them. So I spent a lot of time with my grandparents.
And where did you grow up and where are you now?
So Northeast Ohio. I'm a little further south in Northeast Ohio than where I grew up. I grew up right on Lake Erie, pretty much.
That's been your primary residence for your entire life.
I went out to college at Syracuse University in upstate New York, so I spent time there. I lived in France and Switzerland for a little bit while I was going through my studies, and then I wound up in Cincinnati for a little while, starting out my career, and then moved to DC, where I spent about almost 8 years working and enjoying the district. And then I moved out to Southern California for about 12 and a half years, and we came back here to Northeast Ohio about 3.5 years ago. So I bounced around a bit in my life.
So when you take a look at the various different places you've been and lived, how do you see that the regional differences have a lot to do with what the conflicts might be in someone's life or someone's business world?
So different. I mean, that was probably the hardest thing, was the realization of here in the United States how different things are. Because I went to the East Coast and I remember a friend of mine was like, don't hold doors open for people and like, don't say hi to people that you don't know. That's weird. And growing up in the Midwest, that just seems so foreign. Even moving from the East Coast to California, I came across really, really direct and really rude at first to folks in California. So how to adapt again. I think it's just how people communicate. Like on the East Coast, you could be incredibly direct with somebody. And I'm generalizing, right? But you could be incredibly direct. In most cases, people aren't going to be offended and aren't going to have a problem. Whereas in California, like they definitely wanted to ease into a conversation, and be a little bit more personable. The Midwest, I would say maybe stuff's avoided a little bit more and kind of kept smooth, maybe more often than it should sometimes. But yeah, I think that really says something about those different cultures and the way they communicate.
I think people learn a lot at the table while they're growing up. So what's a food memory that you've had that reveals something about the way that you relate to people?
I'm going to reference my grandparents again and again because I live so close to them, but they would make potato pancakes together. They were from Slovak and Hungarian and German and Austrian backgrounds. So that was a big thing that they liked to make. And what I really loved watching was my grandparents would do it together. My grandfather had been in the army and apparently he'd gotten himself in trouble a few times. So he was an expert at peeling potatoes. He could do them flawlessly and very quickly. So that was the job he always had. And then my grandmother would, do the rest of it, or if I helped out, she'd be the one, frying everything up on the stove. What it taught me was what real partnership looks like in a relationship. And I think that's really translated into what I do is trying to help people figure out, how do you do that dance together and do it in a way that both people feel good about it. And maybe it's not always going to be perfect, but I think it taught me a lot about that, of just how people can pitch in and help each other out.
So when you saw grandma and grandpa in the kitchen together, co-creating this potato pancake dish, that in a way kind of brought you peace.
It did. Yeah. Yeah, I really did. And that was something that they involved me in when I was a kid too, right? They'd get me helping out. And so I learned a lot more about food and about cooking and about the love that people can put into a dish. I've definitely experienced my share of dishes that did not have any love in them in my lifetime. And I'll say that out loud sometimes. And I've had friends laugh when I say, like, this had no love in it. Like, there's nothing here. So I think that was part of it too, is they really helped me understand how you can express that to other people through food.
Glad you brought that up. What's a dish that always starts a fight for you?
Right. Oh gosh. I mean, in my family, it's usually like whether or not to put pineapple on pizza. My husband and my child love it. They think it's great. I don't need it. I don't need it on my pizza. I will say though, like they can have their pizza with pineapple on it. I'm gonna have mine. I can pick it off if I need to. I'm not that bothered. I can't say that it's a knockdown, drag out fight, but we do like to tease each other about the fact that that's different.
Oh, it allows you to look down your nose at them.
Yeah, absolutely. Who puts that on pizza? I'm going to cause a debate here.
Exactly. Now, speaking of food, of course, what have you eaten today?
I had a salad with quinoa and some cilantro lime chicken and a bunch of different vegetables like bell peppers and red onion and some hot sauce. Really trying to have a good healthy lunch that kept me going for the day.
Did you make it?
I did.
So you're pretty good in the kitchen.
A lot of work. Most of it was chopping things, right? But the chicken was something I had to make. Yeah.
I have to ask you, because of what you do and just our few minutes together so far, what's the emotional cost of being the person who you are, who holds a room together, whether it's personal or business?
It definitely weighs on you. I definitely have to take time after engagements like that for myself to kind of process what happened. What I think went well, what I think was a total disaster. And, you try not to take stuff personally, but every once in a while, somebody will say something or, there'll be some nonverbal that I take it personally. And so I have to take a little time to kind of vent that and get that out of my system. Music helps a lot. I honestly have like mixes for that just so I can decompress. And I tend to need time to vent to people, but then I need time by myself after. So it just depends, I guess. But it can really take its toll because I don't think people realize how much is going on mentally and physically in a person who's trying to keep that space together for them.
I can totally relate, but I take everything personally, so I don't even have to juggle with that. What's the most misunderstood thing about conflict?
I think people just naturally think it's bad. And I challenge that with the idea that if it's done constructively, you can get a lot of creativity out of it. A lot of problems can get solved. There's an amazing amount of innovation that can come out of it. I think people just tend to only see it as, war and death and fights and, fist flying and the extreme, right? And so a huge part of what I do and who I am is trying to get people to see that it actually can have some positive impact. It's how we do it that makes all the difference.
It sounds like something Aristotle would say. And I think that anybody who's doing conflict resolution and management and so on should definitely read up and study that guy.
Yeah, I think I had to read him in freshman year of college. Can't say I understood everything, but
probably very similar to what you're doing. It's about arguing with purpose and not with vehemence. And it's about understanding. It really kind of bubbles up and changes from what people's view of arguing is all about now.
Yeah. And it's not just arguing. It's about asking questions. I mean, I think that's what's interesting about Plato and all of those folks, right? Is they were really comfortable with the idea that they don't know anything and to be curious. And I think that is an underrated part of managing conflict, is just going in and being curious and not going in with an agenda. I think when we go into with an agenda, whether it's a personal thing or a work thing or political thing, that's when things fall apart. But if we go in and we're curious and we want to understand why that person is taking the position they're taking, what led them to that place, then that can make all the difference to actually find resolution on the other side.
Looking at the name of your business called Flowing River. So I need to kind of dig down and find out a little bit about the metaphor behind the brand.
Yeah. So I've always lived around water my entire life. I grew up next to a scenic river. I was trying to figure out, what am I going to name my business? And there's so many just boring names you could come up with, but I actually went on a hike the one day because I was really struggling and wound up on one of my favorite trails. And I was sitting by this river and I thought, it is such a good metaphor for conflict that we can fight it, right? We could try to paddle upstream. And it's just going to exhaust us. It's not going to help us out. We can go with it and, we might get taken completely under, and that's not good either. It's something that we might find ourselves in easier situations where it's smooth, where we can relax. We don't have to work as hard, but there are going to be plenty of times where there are rapids, where there's just a lot of activity and we need to be able to just respond and kind of ebb and flow with that. And so that's kind of where the name came.
How do you know when the current has shifted if we're talking about a river which only flows in one direction?
Sure. I mean, I've done my share of very amateur kayaking. I don't do the dangerous stuff, but you can feel it. I think you can feel it. And I think that's something too that I'm guilty of it as well. If I'm not in tune with my own intuition, my own gut feeling of things, I might miss the fact that someone's giving me a signal that things are about to get interesting. I think when I'm more in tune to that and I'm more aware of not just what somebody's saying, but what's happening, with their body, with their nonverbal, then it's a little easier to navigate.
Is there a conflict that you carried around for years before you realized it really wasn't yours?
Yeah. I had a friend that was a friend, didn't wound up not being a friend after a while because she wanted me to be somebody I wasn't. And I would go and I would hang out with her. And I remember I'd come back from it and I'd always wind up calling my best friend. And my best friend would be like, why do you keep hanging out with this person? You're always angry when you leave. She kind of helped me see that, yeah, this person had this idea of who I should be at that age, what my relationships should be like, where my focus should be. And it just didn't match with mine. And that was on her, not me. And when I was able to go, this isn't a healthy relationship for me. I don't need to be a part of this. I have other friends who get me, who get where I am in life and aren't trying to push me in a direction I need to be in. I think that made all the difference. So yeah, not my deal.
It sounds like she was a master button pusher, and that's something that you've been able to learn and study about. And now you must know all the little tips, secrets, tidbits, and life hacks as to how to push someone else's buttons.
You should not use it for evil, though, Matt. You should use it for good. Right? Yeah, I'm not going to give away that. No, I mean, I think that's the thing that's really important in my line of work. Like, I can't manipulate people with it. I think there's a really fine line. But I do think there are buttons that people push. I mean, especially when you talk about families. I volunteer for this organization called Braver Angels, and they bring people together across the political spectrum to have conversations and to try to see each other's humanity, because we're just not doing that right now. And there's this family and politics workshop that we do, and we kind of give people an idea of these different personas that show up at the family dinner table, where these kinds of like awful political conversations can happen these days. And it is interesting because we are teaching people these different archetypes and sort of like, what are the things that are going to tip you off that they're this one or this one? but also like the ways you can actually counteract them. And it's really important though that when people learn it, don't use it, to just completely silence Uncle Joe, right? but use it to hold your own and make sure there's respect for you and your boundaries too when you're having that meal with that person and that conversation. So yeah, people could take it and manipulate, but I hope that they don't.
That's a tough one, because if Uncle Joe is against Bad Bunny, let's just say, and he's coming from a position that is totally wrong, how do you deal with that? How do you bring people together who are just like so out there?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's so funny. We turned everything into like an argument now, right? I mean, it's a Super Bowl performance, but it's become a thing on both ends of the spectrum. I think it's understanding what it is that upsets Uncle Joe about that. Asking those questions, like what upset you about it? What were you hoping to see? What maybe wasn't your thing, right? And trying to dig a little deeper. And I think the other piece is acknowledging what that person cares about and what they just said to you. Because I think most of the time we're so busy waiting for them to finish to jump in with our own position that we're not really hearing each other. And so that's an important piece that I help folks with when I do that volunteer work. And even when I do the paid work, is this idea of acknowledging and saying, I hear you saying that upset you because it's not what you think should be at the Super Bowl. But giving that person time to explain themselves and get below the position and more into like, what do they value and what's the experience that they've had that maybe led to that? Because I worked with a group one time where they were talking about policing, and somebody she spoke up and she said, well, I actually have an experience with my son who got pulled over by the police, but it didn't happen the way you might expect. It actually was a situation where the police was kind to him, and I want to share that side of this too. And so it's interesting because when people actually dive into their stories, it's a lot easier to listen to, and it becomes a little less of this just, I disagree with you. But it's hard to do on social media, and I think that's where most of this stuff takes place anyway.
That dinner table with Uncle Joe, it's like once you know someone's position, how do you even give it the time of day? Because it's such a heavy topic, and you already know that he's out to lunch permanently. Why would you even want to know any more about their racist positions when there's so much good stuff and wonderful people to communicate with?
And that's fair. I mean, you don't have to. I think that's something that I work with people on all the time is it's up to you if you really want to broach that topic or not. But especially if it's family, there is a connection there that's different. And is it worth throwing away? Is there a way to figure out how to be around this person and talk about other things and find the joy in this person instead of just completely writing them off? Because a lot of people, especially people that come to those kinds of workshops and those events, are upset because they no longer talk to a family member. And every single one that I talk to, no matter how crazy they think that person is or how inappropriate they think that person is, they wish it wasn't that way. And they're saddened by the fact that connection is broken. So I think that the only argument in favor of still trying is that I think everybody's redeemable at some point, right? And I got to give them a chance because I would hope that someone would do the same for me.
Right. Fair enough. I want to know what's on your Spotify playlist of the music that Valerie uses when she needs to calm the fuck down.
Well, it's a little bit of a mix. It depends. So it might be 90s alternative rock, which might be I need to get the rage side out a little bit, a little bit of punk. Happy Green Day was on yesterday, even though that wasn't all my favorites that they played. But there's some more soothing, uplifting stuff that I'm trying to remember certain artists, like Coldplay is on there. There are some other international artists that are on there that do more instrumental stuff that has a message that's uplifting and reminds me why I do the work. So that helps. And sometimes I need a little dance music too, because if you just get up and dance, then it feels a little bit better.
Okay. Is that something your husband shares with you, the love of dance?
No.
Right.
That is not his thing. That is not his thing. But that's okay.
Right. It has to be.
I can dance on my own. It's all right.
Okay, Valerie, are you ready for the lightning round?
Gosh, I hope so.
With authority, you said that. Okay. A food you pretend to like, but do not.
Kale.
A conflict you avoid at all costs.
God, I get fights with my mom.
Will she be watching this?
Probably not. She knows
cool.
that.
You want to get into it?
No, it's okay.
Okay.
I'll keep the family, if you don't mind.
Fair enough. What's a smell that always brings you back home?
It's bread. The smell of baked bread.
Do you bake?
I do. It's gotten more complicated because I have had to go gluten-free And that makes it a lot harder to do baked goods. Doable, but a lot harder.
Tell us about that whole gluten-free thing.
I found out I have an autoimmune disorder, and there are certain types of foods or certain types of ingredients that really make my body hate me. And I feel a whole lot better when I don't eat those things. So I miss those things greatly. And every once in a while, I break the rules and I eat them, but then I'm reminded why I shouldn't anymore. So
What happens then? Is it a hives thing?
no, just very, very like pain in pretty much my entire body.
And so you isolated it with bread. What other things will kind of call up the wee beasties?
Dairy, sadly.
Man,
I studied abroad in France, so I mean, cheese and bread, like that was the hardest thing. I think cheese was the hardest thing to give up. That's the one I'll break the rules for a really, really good cheese.
the show has taken a turn for the sad.
Sorry, you asked.
I did. It's all my fault. What's a belief you've changed your mind about very recently?
I think it was about some of these dietary issues. I never really understood why people were so adamant about having those diets and experiencing it for myself. I understand now how hard it is for people to go out, especially, and enjoy restaurants, depending on where you live. There are certain cities where they totally get it. I was in DC back in December, and every place I went, I had tons of options and they understood. But there are places where that's just not the case. And so I really feel for people. That was I don't even know if that was a belief, but that was something I just did not understand and I didn't have sympathy for beforehand. And now I really get it.
Okay, Valerie, it is time now to turn the tables. We're going to take the pressure off of you. You survived all my questions for this previous 40 minutes. Now you get to turn the tables on me.
What's a relationship you wish you could revisit, rebuild, or do over?
It would probably be with, and this is more recently speaking, a lot of the people whose relationships I've had that have gone astray because of the whole COVID shit show and the political stuff that came after.
If you could cook together with that person or those people, what dish would you make?
It would probably be whatever their favorite dish is, but they don't have the experience or the wherewithal to make it. I would help teach them and get us there together.
That's really cool that you lend your expertise in that way and support them in that way.
What's the taste you want to leave in people's mouths when they think of you as the person, as the girl, as the wife, as the mentor, as the teacher, and all the things that you are?
Man, that's a tough question. I guess that I'm genuinely here. I really want to connect with people and I really want to help them see that conflict doesn't have to be a bad thing, that there's actually hope for us all. And there's a way for us to work through these differences together.
Now that you're doing what you're doing, can you say that there was a delineation point as to when you started your work and how many friends you have now?
I think I have more. And I think it's because just to start my own business, I mean, it is a haul. It is hard. And it is repeatedly hard. I don't know that it will ever get easier. And so I had to realize very, very quickly, very early on that I didn't know everything and I needed help. And so I think initially it was just seeking expertise and seeking help. But now it's really just building connections with people who are going through the same thing. Because it's just so nice to have a support network that understands and can kind of commiserate, go through that. So I think I probably know more people now out of necessity for the business, but also because it's genuinely nice to be around people that get what I'm doing and get what I'm about.
Yeah, I'm curious as to how you market yourself into the business world out there.
Yeah, sure. I mean, my focus is really on individual leaders, their teams and their organizations. And so depending on whether they're in a situation where things are blowing up and out of control and they've got people leaving, right? They've got complaints, they've got maybe even some legal issues happening where they need to really stop the madness right there. That can determine one pathway for them. But they might be an organization that's actually pretty good, pretty solid, maybe don't have everything so consistent across the board. And they're worried about the next COVID, right? The next disruption or something, then there's a totally different approach I can take with them. And I can work with them as individuals on the management side of things or the prevention side, or the team or the entire organization. And we can go as small as a webinar or as large as a commitment of, 12 months to really work with a team and really help them go through these issues and start to build the systems they need to actually prevent stuff down the road.
Since DEI kind of took a nosedive here in the recent few years, how has that affected your work?
I think what's interesting is I don't think it's had an impact. To be honest with you, I think the bigger impact is a lot of the focus is on AI now. And so a lot of resources are being put there. With DEI, what I do, it doesn't matter if the organization is diverse, is working to make the place more inclusive. This stuff is necessary. And it doesn't matter what those differences are, whether it's something that's racial or gender-based or whatever. Organizations need this to really be able to be productive and to keep their people and keep them happy. So I don't necessarily think that has impacted me at all.
You brought up AI at least a couple times during our conversation so far. How has that impacted the business world as far as your perception, and how has that affected you and your work internally?
Yeah, I think perception-wise, I think everybody out there is trying to stand out and everybody's using the stuff. And the problem with it is everybody sounds the same. So I personally really struggle with trying to find the balance, right, of when I use it and how I use it, because I still want to make sure that the essence of who I am is getting out there, that it sounds like me and it sounds like the business that I am. So there's plenty of times where I write stuff and then I'll maybe have it check it for branding and things. Or I'll have it do some research or give me ideas and then I take it and I put my spin on it. But I'm not one of those people who just lets it do stuff, run amok. I don't think we're there. I would just add to the slop that's out there, and I don't want to do that because there's enough people that I'm connected with that hate it that it just doesn't make any sense to do that.
Do you see a lot of organizations getting rid of good people and replacing with AI?
I don't know necessarily yet if that's the main reason why those things are happening. I think it's still a lot of it has to do with money and bottom line. And that's why a lot of these layoffs happen. They grew as much as they needed to grow, and then they needed to do that contraction. So I don't necessarily know that it's replacing everybody yet, but everything that I hear and I read is focused on Gen Z and like people just coming into the workforce. It seems like it's more of an impact on them because a lot of the stuff that AI can do is entry-level work. So I think that's probably where the biggest impact is. And I think it's anybody who's just completely unwilling to use it and learn the skills, I think are going to find themselves in a world of hurt. But I don't know that it can necessarily fully replace people, especially in professions where you have to engage with people. Coaching and therapy are a really good example. There are horrible examples of people using AI as a therapist, and the outcomes have been awful, deadly even. So I think there are certain professions like mine that it might be used as a supplemental tool, but I don't know that it's ever really truly going to replace us because people still need that human-to-human connection to make that.
I find myself sometimes when using AI cursing the AI when they give me preposterous or stupid responses to my queries. And so I'm just wondering, it is in its infancy. It's only been around 2-3 years. And what happens in 5 years, 10 years from now? Are they going to be able to somehow generate empathy and connection and communication? If I'm here telling you that I'm cursing them, but I'm seeing their growth, isn't it kind of natural to think that they're going to be way far along in just months and years?
I think that's the fear, right? I came of age when Terminator was out, so it's always at the back of my mind.
Right.
I'll be honest, I speak very kindly to my AI assistant, very, very kindly. I treat it like an intern that just doesn't understand everything and needs to have explicit expectations spelled out. But I agree, I get sometimes where like it creates an image and I have 6 fingers on one hand and I'm like, come on, really?
And you don't, right?
I could have done
Prove
that.
it now.
I don't.
There we go.
I think the frustration I get is if I've spent time crafting a really good prompt and it still generates junk, and I'm going back and I'm giving it more and more and it's like, I could have already done this. I think it's more the realization that I am mad at myself for being too dependent on it.
Yeah. Okay. We're going to have you do an impromptu promo, Valerie, and this is to aid folks who haven't watched the show, and you're going to in your promo, tell people why your experience with Matthew Gray was fill in the blank, who we are, what we did, where we are, all that kind of stuff. So give me an impromptu promo. Discuss the things that we've been doing here today, because you really want to sell this show to a good friend of yours who after the show says, what was it like?
Sure. Well, hey, it's me, your friend Valerie. I'm just finished up a podcast with Matt Gray called 50 Tastes of Gray. And we kind of talked about everything. We talked about food, food memories. We talked about what makes people disagree and why we have such a hard time coming together on issues where we have a lot of difference. We talked about AI and how afraid of it we are, and how much it angers us. We covered a lot, and we got really personal. And that's why you should watch it, and you should watch other episodes, because you get an opportunity to really get to know a person on a very human level. And I think that's a lot of what's missing today. And so definitely check out this episode and check out other ones on the channel.
Wow, Valerie, thank you so much for hanging with me here on 50 Tastes of Gray. I bet this was way more fun than you thought it would be.
I thought it would be fun, actually. I was not surprised. So thank you for living up to the expectation.
Well, you see, no AI here, my friend.
Exactly, right? It's real.
I loved having you here. Thank you so much. Where would people be able to find out a little bit more about you if they're so inclined?
Sure. They can go to my website, which is www.flowingrivercs.com. They can find me on LinkedIn as Valerie Polunas. I have a YouTube channel, which is Flowing River Conflict Solutions. You can find ways to connect with me on the phone or email through all of that. So yeah, they can reach out to me any way they wish.
This was fun, right?
Yes, it was. Thank you. Really. Yeah, don't tell the others I said that.
No, I have to. I'm going to lead with that. You know, they always say hook first, brand second.
Oh, so funny.
So thank you for hanging with me. Say aloha to all of the audience, please.
Aloha, audience.